The Colts need a get-right performance in the worst way, but there's an old familiar face standing in their way this week. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks, which is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Jake Arthur, and he is Zack Hicks. Of course, you know the two of us from horseshoehuddle.com. And we're joined by a very special guest today. He's a former Pro Bowler, first-round pick, the Panthers' all-time leading rusher, and the owner of one of the best running back aesthetics in NFL history. It is Jonathan Stewart. Welcome to the show, man. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, man. Thank you, man. Thanks for having me on, despite, the Panthers' season so far, but I think we're in alignment right now.
Yeah, I think both sides are going through. The Colts, it's not going super great either. Obviously, a lot of familiarity there, though. So far, about midway through the season, what's your impression of the Frank Reich-led Panthers team?
I think, for the most part, I think a lot of people that are smart football fans understand what the process is like when you have a new coaching staff, I don't care what you say about, drafting a number one, pick, especially at quarterback. There's a learning curve. And, I think the offensive coordinating situation is now, set. But with that, there was a learning curve there for everyone. Your scheme and the things you want to do, you might not necessarily have all the pieces that fit your scheme. So you're having to, figure out what it is that actually works for the guys that are on your squad and the guys that are healthy. You talk about depth issues throughout the whole entire season. I mean, I feel like a lot of teams have depth issues now that you think about it, but I think, as a football fan, you have to hit the reset button. And if you do that, 1-6 isn't so bad. Especially if you're in this division. At the end of the day, you're 2 games out. And you still got a lot of games left to play, including some division games. So you rally some games together, and you stay positive and you show up to games as a fan and continue to cheer these guys on and just be positive about what's going on with the coaching staff. I mean, this coaching staff, I think they're doing a great job. I think last game showed a lot of what is to come. Being able to win tough games like that, it's hard. It's easier when things are going well for one side of the ball, and then, to find the momentum at some point in the game, but to never find any momentum on any side of the ball, on any side of the ball, and then to be able to take a 6-minute drive down on offense and win a game, that strikes me as a team that is being coached well, because that's all about execution.
Yeah. No, I want to get back to this Panthers team, obviously, here in a second. But since we have you on the show, it's such a unique perspective when it comes to running back play. The Colts have a really interesting dynamic going right now in their running back field. They have Jonathan Taylor, who they just gave a big extension to, one of the best running backs in football. And then they have Zack Moss, who's the second leading rusher in the NFL, a really, really good 1-2 punch. Famously, you were part of one of the best 1-2 punches in NFL history. What is that dynamic like when you have 2 running backs that are playing at such a high level and 2 really good running backs? How's that dynamic work with the other guy next to you? Like, obviously you want your carries, but like, it's productive for the offense.
Yeah, man. I think as long as the offense is driven to produce in the running game, I mean, my first couple of years, our offensive coordinator, Coach Davidson, he, was all about running the ball. I mean, it would be 4th and 5 or 3rd and 10, running draw, and just make something happen. It's either a draw or we're doing a smoke to Smitty. But as long as you're committed to the run game, that means there's going to be carries available for both. And not that, there's like I want the carries type of mentality, but as a running back, you want to make an impact.
Yeah.
Especially considering the fact that Zack Moss proved himself to be worthy of having some carries. And so now if this was, the other way around where Zack Moss was on the bench and Jonathan Taylor was playing in the beginning of the season and we never got a chance to see Zack Moss, we wouldn't be saying, oh, we should be giving both of them carries, right? But in this case, now you have two guys that are fresh. You got two fresh backs that, give a defense a different taste. That defenses don't like that, especially the types of backs they are. I mean, they're solid big backs, in consideration to the rest of the league. Guys that know how to run downhill, make one play and get upfield, but also know how to make guys miss in the secondary and stuff like that. So, I think what they got is something special, and they can build on that for sure. If I were them, I would just, stack that offensive line, and just continue to get some depth there. Find you a nice addition to Pittman, and you're not far away on offense.
Yeah.
Now defense, that's another story.
Oh yeah, that defense is tough.
Yeah.
We had kind of a whole roast session about it throughout the week. You kind of alluded to this earlier. When you've got a young team, new coaching staff, it's a process. So from the outside, on the face of it, the Panthers 1-6. It looks like they're not a very good team. Bryce Young has been underwhelming. The Colts have seen a lot of that as well. Anthony Richardson, rookie, got banged up. Not everything was super flashy. How could you dispel some of the myths that maybe people from the outside who don't know better are saying about the Panthers?
I mean, you see these types of teams every year. It reminds me of the Miami Dolphins, like 3 years ago or 4 years ago. But everyone said, oh, here's the same old Miami. They got new draft pick and they're not good. Draft picks don't make you good immediately. You have to build your team, especially like I said, you have a new offensive coordinator, you have a new defensive coordinator, new scheme on defense. Even you're running a 3-4 now. So but I think right now the guys that are on that defense, as they continue to get healthy, you're seeing a defense that's actually pretty strong. That's one of our strong points right now as the Carolina Panthers. But I mean, these are guys that are learning how to win at depth, learning how to win games that, guys are put in situations that seem impossible almost. And so we haven't been out of a lot of, like, the first, I think the Atlanta game we could have won. Just a couple plays, a couple hiccups there. But this is a team that's not been getting blown out by any means by every team that they've lost to. So what they're doing in the locker room, man, it's definitely some growing pains, right? And you need that if you're going to be a good team down the road. Because at the end of the day, once you learn what it feels like to lose, and you learn how guys respond under pressure, that's when you really learn how to win games.
Yeah, I think on paper this isn't a super exciting matchup, but I think between the Colts and this Panthers team, I think there's potential there for it to be a pretty good matchup. But Jonathan, thanks again so much for taking out some of your time to talk with us. Catch him on the Believe in Panthers podcast and on Twitter/X and Instagram at Jonathan Stewart 1. No T. Jonathan Stewart 1. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and the sharks, you pick more or less for stat projections on 2 to 6 players and watch the winnings roll in. They got some really cool stuff going on as well. With basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League. I know there's a lot of people out there, Zack included, that watch both the NFL and NBA pretty religiously. This is a league that's created specifically for combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. Just for example, LeBron James and Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made and receptions. Like, that is a really, really cool thing that I definitely am excited to get more into. PrizePicks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and they don't return in the second, then that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only DFS platform with an injury insurance policy. This week for the Colts, I'm really intrigued by this one because they have Jonathan Taylor with a more or less than 95.5 rushing yards against the Panthers. Obviously, the Panthers rank near the bottom of the league in rush defense, but they're probably going to sell their souls to stop Taylor and Moss. So, I mean, is the Colts blocking going to overcome that, or do you have the confidence to go with it? I don't know. You guys are better than me if you're going to go ahead and guess on it. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
And guys, football season is here, and Locked On is kicking off our coverage with Locked On NFL Kickoff Live. Every Friday, Locked On will go live at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on every Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Hosts Tanitra Batiste, Jarvis Davis, and Kyle Krabs will break down every single game on the NFL slate and get you ready for your team's matchups, your fantasy lineups, your betting angles, and more. Plus, get the in-depth local analysis from our stable of NFL hosts across the country who know these teams better than anyone else. Find Locked On NFL Kickoff Live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on any Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Jake, getting into our segment 2, we're going to talk about this matchup between the Colts and the Panthers. Obviously, the Colts offense is riding I'm not going to say a super high right now, but it's riding a much higher high than the Colts defense. Yeah. Then when you're looking at the Panthers, their whole team is riding a pretty good high after getting their very first victory, despite their offense having a really bad season, their defense not having the greatest season either. Mm-hmm. I know on paper this is a boring matchup, like you said when we were talking with Jonathan there, but I don't know. I think that we could see some fireworks just because these defenses are so bad, and you have the Panthers offense finding a little bit of a groove, and then the Colts offense playing fairly well as well.
Yeah, I'm getting real Colts-Browns vibes. Like, now the Panthers defense is not what the Browns was, but like no one expected those offenses to do what they did. And I really think that, like you said, I think there's a chance for some fireworks here for both sides to kind of get right. Because I know Bryce Young hasn't really, he's been a little underwhelming as well compared to when Anthony Richardson was out there and what CJ Stroud has done. But yeah, real opportunity. The Colts are kind of open for business defensively, just kind of letting everybody do their thing right now. I think when you look at it, you obviously have to look at the Colts run game. It's an opportunity for them to kind of, they don't think they did anything wrong, but kind of correct abandoning things in the second half last week. It's what was working, and it's the clear area to attack the Panthers defense. So, I mean, Shane Steichen seems to be the type of guy who is going to identify the weakness and attack it for as long as it's able to be done. So that's kind of the big X factor for me here is it seems so obvious that will the Panthers just give up everything to take away the run and make Gardner beat them, because that hasn't gone well so far this season.
Yeah, well, what the Colts are really running into an issue with opposing defenses is these opposing defenses, when it came down to like the Jaguars game, for instance, they were in base defense for pretty much that entire game. Mm-hmm. They were daring the Colts to throw the ball, and it didn't work out. You go to this past game against the Saints were in base defense all game, but they were dropping their strong safety into the box on every single snap. They were having their nickel corners playing the run really aggressive. So it was like they were in base defense for the whole game. So rightfully so, the Colts will transition into a passing heavy attack, but Gardner Minshew's not that kind of guy. And it is kind of funny though that we had this whole conversation all week about how the Colts abandoned the run this past game, where they finished the game, I think, with like 23 carries for, it was like 160 yards rushing. It was around 160 yards rushing. 23 carries is a good amount for your running backs, but because the Colts have run the ball in some of these games 30, 35, 40 times, we're expecting it to hit that, that kind of marker every single time they have some success. But I do think, going away from that tangent there, I do think that they are in a good position this week to get back to that running game, get both of these running backs 15 plus carries, hit the ground running and just kind of rely on your offensive line to win up front in the trenches. Yes, the Panthers will probably come out in base defense a lot. Yes, they'll probably bring their safety down and you're going to have to throw them out of that at times in this game. But I wouldn't hate the Colts to try to attack strength with strength at times in this game. That's the one thing I've really had against Shane Steichen with it. Like, again, I'm opposed to running into a brick wall constantly like they were at points last week's game, but sometimes you do have to attack strength with strength and just rely on your guys winning that matchup. Now, if it leads to 3rd and 8s and 3rd and 9s, then you have to go away from it. But until they show they can stop it, keep running it. So I think this is going to be one of those games where, like, if the running game is getting going early like it was last week, keep leaning on it, keep relying on it. Don't turn to Gardner Minshew too early because we just know who he is. And especially in a matchup like this where it might come down to whoever turns the ball over a fewer amount of times is going to win. And when you're looking at this Panthers defense, they have 6 takeaways this whole season. Gardner Minshew has given the ball away more times the last 2 games than the Panthers have all year. So it really comes down to, can the Colts play within control and keep things just moving on offense and not turn the ball over? Because again, I think the Panthers offense is going to score a little bit in this game, but I do think the Colts defense is going to have a little more success this week than what they did last week. Hopefully.
Yeah, they're a real interesting defense because, again, 29th against the run, and that includes a true 28th in yards per carry. They're giving up 4.7, but they're 30th in scoring. They give up 28.4. Like you mentioned, only 6 takeaways, but both them and the Colts are really good at getting off the field on 3rd downs. But they're also not getting very many sacks. They rank near the bottom of the league in sacks as well, I think. So they're just a really interesting group, kind of swarming. Ejiro Evero knows what he's doing there. So real interested in that. Regardless of whether or not the Colts are going to be able to run, Gardner taking care of the football is like point 1A, 1B, 1C. Like, I don't think this is a matchup where they're going to be able to afford those. There are certain ones where Myles Garrett comes from your blind side. Yes, you're going to fumble 9 out of 10 times, but the careless ones are like the real unnecessary ones are just things they're going to have to avoid.
Yeah. One more thing I want to throw out though about the Colts defense versus the Panthers offense is these 2 little snippets with that kind of matchup. One is the Colts have really been getting killed by the quarterbacks who get the ball out quickly and know how to attack the middle of the field, especially at the intermediate level. Even last week with Derek Carr, I know that was a little bit of an outlier because that was just Tony Brown getting abused in the passing game. But there were a lot of situations in that game where the Panthers were just getting what they wanted over the middle of the field, especially with Alvin Kamara out of the backfield. You go back to earlier matchups in the season, CJ Stroud just killing them on those dig routes over the middle. Matthew Stafford killing them with dig routes over the middle. Those were the quarterbacks that really kill the Colts defense, those precise, accurate quarterbacks. I'm not saying Bryce Young isn't that, but Bryce Young is still in like a beginner's phase, I guess, in his development. He's not as precise. He's not as on time or in rhythm as some of these other quarterbacks they've played. And we've seen Gus Bradley's defense have more success against those types. Lamar Jackson back in week 3. You go back to the Titans game against Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill was able to get the ball out a little bit, but it still wasn't very effective or productive yards overall. So I think when you have the quarterbacks who are struggling or whatever going into the Colts matchup, who struggle with their accuracy and getting the ball out in rhythm, the Colts defense has played a little bit better. And then one more thing I did want to throw out there too for the Colts defense is when Gus Bradley was hired to be the Colts defensive coordinator, a big part of that was because Frank Reich was not terrified of playing against him, but hated playing against Gus Bradley's defenses. Absolutely hated them. Throughout his whole career, the biggest reason why he wanted Gus is because when Carson Wentz and the Colts played against the Raiders the year before, they gave the Colts offense a lot of fits. So it's something that Gus Bradley's always kind of had a little bit of success against Frank Reich and those offenses. So we'll see how that matchup goes. Obviously, Frank knows that defense well because he was around it all last season, but Gus knows Frank really well too. So it could go the other way as well. So we'll see if the Colts defense can bounce back. We'll talk about that again in our final segment here, but it's going to be an interesting one. It's such a big game for this Colts defense. They need to bounce back in this matchup, or it might be donezo for them this whole entire season.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those ones they really have to win because everything on paper says they should. I mean, the statistics I think for the Panthers are a true reflection of it. 27th on offense, 25th in scoring. They're giving up a lot of sacks, tied for 26th, 31st in passing yards per attempt at 5.8. That was a Frank Reich key passing metric that he always said needed to be much higher. That's how one way he measures passing game success, and that's not reflective of his offense right now. So yeah, that's going to be really interesting. So guys, we got more for you coming up here in a minute. We're going to give you our final predictions, let you know what we think is going to happen. Folks, I have a problem that I have zero intention of getting help with, and that is ordering food all the time. And for that, I use DoorDash. Whether it's cabin coffee for my weekend coffee, El Rodeo number 5 whenever I need my Mexican fix, or Portillo's when Zack's in town and I need to get any of the numerous Chicago-style food restaurants that we've got around here, DoorDash is the dial-up. And with that, you get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCKED23. Subject to change, terms apply. And I cannot stress enough, again, for someone like me who orders just constantly, Dash Pass is so clutch. I suggest it even if you don't order all the time, but it just makes things cheaper. And that stuff really adds up. Again, for me, who is ordering weekend coffee all the time, I am most likely ordering tonight. My daughter, I think, wants some chicken nugs. So, I mean, I can't make them as good as the restaurants do. So why not dial up our friends over at DoorDash? So, again, don't forget to use code LOCK23 for 50% off up to a $10 value on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and spend $15 or more. Subject to change, terms apply. All right, Zach. So this one, again, I think it's going to be more entertaining than what it is on its face right now. It's just like kind of two middling teams with unspectacular on either side of the ball. But we know the Colts, and we know that this game is going to have points from both sides because the defense has just been very generous lately. So I'll open the floor to you first. What do you see the outcome here? And like to get there, what are the, like, when you look at your crystal ball and you get your final score here, what has happened to lead to that?
I think it really just comes down to which offense gives up fewer sacks and turns the ball over a fewer amount of times. And again, when you look at the stats on the year, the Colts defense has been better at generating turnovers than the Panthers defense. The Colts defense has been better at getting sacks than the Panthers defense. And I think that's going to be a huge aspect in this game. So when I'm looking at my crystal ball and looking at how the Colts got this victory is what I'm predicting. The Colts getting the victory this weekend. I think if a lot of it comes down to that, I think these offenses are going to move the ball steadily. It's not going to be gigantic gash plays unless it's on the ground, because I just don't think either of these passing offenses are really like that explosive. They have, two explosive running games, or what could be explosive running game for the Panthers, because the Colts don't have defensive tackles right now. So I think it's going to be one of those games where it's going to be 3 yards in a cloud of dust, 4 yards in a cloud of dust for these offenses. And we're going to be just ripping our hair out watching these defenses try to get any kind of stop whatsoever. But I do think it's going to come down to those few drives where, the Colts got a sack here. The Panthers are facing a 3rd and 12. They're not going to get that 3rd and 12. They're going to throw some wide receiver screen and get stuff for a 2-yard gain. And then on the other side, again, if Gardner Minshew has like 2 or 3 fumbles and the Panthers are starting in plus territory, then obviously they're going to get some more points there. But I think ultimately the Colts are going to come away with this game with more sacks, a couple more turnovers with their defense, and that's going to be the deciding factor. I do think it's going to be like a big high-scoring game. I have 31-27 Colts in this one. But I do think ultimately, again, the Colts are going to be able to run the ball really well. Their passing game is going to be efficient and effective for the most part. It really comes down to just don't turn the ball over and don't have negative yardage plays. Keep everything going forward. Keep your defense fresh on the other side of the ball. and good things can happen. But yeah, I don't think this is a matchup between two great teams. Obviously, this are two teams that are struggling right now, but I do think the Colts are the better team with more talent and honestly the better coaching staff right now too. So hopefully they can get it done this weekend. But I do think ultimately it's going to come down to those sacks and those turnovers.
Yeah, I agree. I like you said 31-27 on the crossover. Is that right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So I have 31-24. I think I really liked your score prediction, but I'm going to give the Colts defense just like a smidge more credit, I guess, and keep a field goal off the board there. But no, I agree. I think the Colts game or the Colts run game will be able to be pretty effective. And when you can do that, that opens up play action. That gets you up early on the down and distance. We know Gardner likes to get those quick shots going. If Kylan Granson is back, that would be really big for them, I think. Him and Josh Downs over the middle of the field, creating yards after catch opportunities. I think that'd be big. And then I think one of the biggest things that we're going to have to see, and you mentioned it, is the sacks, because it's just not been there for the Colts lately. They still have the guys there, but I think you're also kind of seeing the effectiveness and presence of Grover Stewart and how that plays into it. Him not being there. I know off the tackles, the Panthers have kind of struggled keeping pressure off the quarterback. I like Ebukam to come back with another sack this week. Kwity Paye has been kind of dry lately as well, so I could see another sack for him. It's going to have to come off the edge. DeForest Buckner's going to do his thing. Whether or not he'll be able to get a sack, we'll see. But I really am counting on the edge guys to get back into it and be a little more productive than they have been the last few weeks.
Yeah. And I think a big thing too in this game for the Colts is getting ahead early and kind of establishing yourself as the better team early in this game, because one thing I did want to devote a whole segment to this week, but we just didn't have enough shows, was Gardner Minshew is so game flow dependent at quarterback. And it's been so obvious these last couple of weeks where when the Colts are ahead and when he's able to be that quarterback with the lead, which actually goes back to those two games that he came in for Anthony Richardson. He came into those games with leads, and those were probably his two best games of the entire year, where he just didn't turn the ball over, where he was able to keep everything kind of contained and in front of him. And he had really good football games against both the Titans and the Texans. Now, when you go to these other games where he's starting from start to finish and he's the guy from the minute one of the game, and you have the ebbs and flows of an actual game, you have the times where your team is losing, the times where your team needs a quick drive here to get back into it. He's not really that quarterback, like he's not like, again, I know the Cleveland game, he was able to get some things going. A lot of those were on all sides by the defense, getting the ball down the field and getting things going that way. But for the most part, he's such a game flow dependent quarterback to where if his team's ahead and the team's rolling, he can play more contained. He can play more, get the ball out. Okay, we can be a little more conservative and I can take my shots every now and then. But when that game flow is going against him, when the team is losing, when on the other side of the ball, his defense is getting a stops, that's when you start seeing like the happy feet. That's when you see the inaccuracies. That's when you see him forcing some throws, him, when a sack is about to happen, him still holding onto the ball and getting hit from behind. That's where you see a lot of those things happen. The mistakes happen when he feels like he has to make plays. So if the Colts can come out early in this game, score early, score once or twice early, get that lead, and make Gardner Minshew the game manager, easy game flow type of quarterback, then they have a good chance of winning it. But if it gets into a game like it's been the last couple of weeks where it's a shootout, where he needs to score 30 to 40 points in order to win, that's when you're going to see more mistakes, and that's where the turnovers happen. So hopefully the Colts can get ahead of it early and they can just keep him in cruise control the rest of the game, and that's how they can win this football game against the Panthers.
I like it, cruise control. That's going to be the tag on this episode. But no, I'm looking for this one. They need it bad. 3-6 is not going to be a good look. Falling to a team that was 1-6 coming into it. Again, they've got a really important stretch. They got the Patriots in Germany. They've got the Buccaneers coming up, the bye week sandwich in there as well. So really important stretch coming up from them. They need the win. We both think it's going to happen.
Yeah. I definitely think I don't want to say must win, obviously, because we're at the point in the season where every game is a must win, but they have to finish strong going into the bye. Obviously, you want to go 2-0 going into the bye. At least get one of these going into the bye so you can convince yourself that there's brighter days ahead. But just get healthy going into the bye, get some positive momentum going into it, and roll after that. But everydayers, don't worry, we'll be back with you guys on Sunday after the game. It's going to be a bit of a later show because I believe the Colts play at 4 this weekend. Right, Jake? think they play at 4.
I would have to look. I'll be honest. I have not looked yet.
I believe they play at 4 this weekend. So, guys, we'll be with you after the game. And if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zack Hicks2, all on Twitter. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube where we listen to your podcast. We'd love you guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll see you guys back here on Sunday after the game.